Hey guys, it's Ms. Shellman here. I'm sorry I have to be away today. I'm teaching a class for teachers, but I didn't want you to fall behind, so I decided to try this teaching video today. So remember last time you were with me, we learned a lot about Navajo weaving, and we learned that the Navajo use their weaving to tell stories through symbols and colors. We're going to do something really similar in our weaving. We are going to tell personal stories by using a variety of colors and materials, and I'm going to show you how that works. Here's my story. When I was in college, I decided I absolutely wanted to learn Spanish. So I convinced a lot of people to help, a lot of my family to help me pay for a trip to go study in Ecuador. Now, Ecuador is a country in Latin America where everyone speaks Spanish. And I'm going to have the teacher pause right here and show you Ecuador on the world map in our classroom. Welcome back. So, in Ecuador, Ecuador is a country right on the equator, and that's how it gets its name. It is a very general, it's a pretty hot country when you get low down, and then it gets really cold when you get up to the mountains. Well, I had this friend, Christina, and she was into camping and hiking, and so was I. So we decided to take a backpacking trip together. Backpacking is when you go camping, but you carry everything on your back so that you can hike for a day and then camp somewhere different at each night. So we started way down in that steamy jungle, and it was super green. So that's why I've used green here. But we did hike up into the mountains, and as we hiked up, we realized that we were entering a storm. It was kind of like walking up into a cloud. It all of a sudden got really cold, hard to see. We had to rope it together so that we didn't lose each other. And it got very, very windy up on this ridge, this mountain ridge. All of a sudden things started kind of flying off our backpacks. And so I've used this bag to represent that wind up there. We decided we could not hang out up there on the ridge. It was absolutely too dangerous. So we noticed that we thought if we walk down, we'll probably find a path. Well, we walked down the hill and there was no path. We did come to a riverbed where we thought, well, we can walk along the river. So we camped the night there. And we, the next day, set off down this river to try to find our way, kind of make a loop out instead of having to go back on this dangerous ridge. So we followed the river and never found a trail. We had to use machetes to cut down the vines and leaves that were in our way, and so that's why I've used green again here. And eventually, I kept hoping for signs of other people, and I noticed this bright pink color way down the river. And as I thought, for sure that's a piece of clothing or some sign that we're getting close to a village. Well, we got closer and closer, and it was just a bright pink flower. So, of course, I was very disappointed. And right about then, the edge of the river started getting too rocky and steep for us to stay in the river. So we climbed up above and walked along up above for a while. But that again got too steep, and we noticed we could probably get back down to the river and continue walking along the river. But there was a little rocky cliff in our way. So that's what this black is representing, that rocky cliff. Well, I decided that the best way to get down was going to be to get a bunch of vines wrapped together and kind of work my way down the vines Tarzan style. Well, I think you can imagine what probably happened. Yep, I fell. So I hit this rock at the bottom super hard. I landed right on this rock, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. I told my friend Christina, there is absolutely a problem here. I am in the most extreme pain in my life. I'm not sure if I can walk. So we sat there for a while and tried to figure out what we were going to do. We were about 3 days. We knew if we retraced our steps from any type of civilization. But we figured I could at least get up and move just a little, so we put all of my heavy things in her backpack, and Christina and I slowly walked back for 3 days. I was in a ton of pain the entire time, so that's why I've used this red color. Well, as you can imagine, as soon as we got done, we went straight to the hospital. So that's why I've used this unconventional material here, this tube that I've decided to weave in, to represent my hospital stay, like a medical tube. Well, they did some x-rays on my back and found that I had fractured my back in 3 places. And back then, this was about 15 years ago, they thought that if you broke your back, you needed to wear a cast. So they wrapped me in this plaster cast, and that's what I'm using this white fabric to represent. And I was in this complete body, upper body cast for quite a while. And anymore, they don't do that. They say you just need to rest. But at the time, they put me in this super uncomfortable cast. But I made it through, and I did heal, even though I continued to have some back pain. And I eventually made it back with my family. So that's why I've chosen this warm color here, if that makes sense. So there's my story, and I'm going to show you how I kind of planned for that story. Today, you're going to be creating a story, filling out a story planning sheet. So here it is. You're going to start with your name at the top as soon as you get it, and then you're going to put your class 5-0 at the top. This is your planning sheet. You need at least 3 ideas for excellent stories. Excellent stories are the kind of stories that made you feel a very strong emotion, not the kind of story that has happened to anybody else. So right here, you can think of a funny story, here a sad story, here an adventure story, here a story about a special place. So I've written Broken Back for the adventure, and I've written Treehouse. These are just some words to remind me of the story. I don't have to write the story down on this line. There wouldn't be enough room. And then a story about your family. I've chosen a Thanksgiving story that I have. And of course, here's a line for any other story that you might like to tell that doesn't fit in these categories. You don't need to fill them all out, but you need at least 3. And then when you know you have your best story, circle it. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to complete this sheet, and I want you focused at your tables doing that. If you finish before the other people at your table, that's great. You can help them think of ideas quietly. The other thing you can do is start brainstorming the kinds of materials you want to use. I don't want you to think of every kind of material you want to use because you might want to make some changes as you start weaving. But I'm going to give you an example of writing the material here. I use green yarn to represent this part of the story, the jungle at the beginning of my hike. Then I used gray cloth to represent the storm. Today you'll be using yarn, but the next time you see me, I'll have a bunch of other materials that you can weave into your story weaving. So you're going to have right now, we're going to pause this video, and you're going to have about 5 minutes to get your story, your idea for your story written down. Okay, let's pass out materials. Welcome back. So we are going to be weaving today, and last time you warped your loom. If by any chance your loom is not properly warped, or you weren't here, you need to ask the substitute teacher for a loom. I've left some extra completely warped looms so you can go ahead and get started. All of us have a pretty long string on the back. Yours will be longer than mine. What you want to do is cut the strings on the back to about this length. This is about 4 fingers long. And today that's an important rule to remember. Tails should usually be about 4 fingers long. And here you can see my other one is also 4 fingers long. These tails might be across from each other, or they might be right next to each other, and that doesn't matter. So as soon as you have those tails cut on the back, go ahead and take, we'll put a roll of masking tape at your table. Go ahead and put that roll of masking tape, or put some tape on both of those so they're nice and tight. Back here. So this is what your loom should look like now in the back, and then flip it over and you're ready to weave. So your first job is to think about your first color for your story, to tell your story, and then head on over to the yarn cart, which the substitute teacher will show you as soon as this tutorial is over. And from the yarn cart, you want to pull out yarn. You want to select about an arm's length of yarn. So if it's too short, you won't be able to weave very much, but if it's too long, you might have too much of that color. So stretch out your arm and measure about 1 arm's length before you cut, and then pull the tail back out so the next person has yarn. If you cut it right up next to the box, it'll fall back into the box and we won't be able to use that color again. So we'll also be giving you a blue needle to weave. It's a perfect width for our looms today. You will not get your needle until you can show the substitute teacher today that you have selected a story. All right, so I'm going to feed the end of my yarn into my needle here, and I'm pulling it out. Now remember that 4 finger rule, so you want a short tail of about 4 fingers on your yarn here, and you'll see I have a longer tail hanging out the other way, and then I'm ready to weave. So I'm going to start by putting my needle under the first string and over the next. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And then you can look and check that you have correctly woven under, over, under, over by just looking at your needle. And then you pull it through. This is where a lot of people make a mistake the first time weaving. They pull it through and they stop right here. What you need to do is continue to pull it through. Continue to pull it through until you have a tail that is, I bet you can guess, 4 fingers long. Okay? So there's your tail right there. And you're going to push it down. And remember in the video, the Navajo weaver that we saw, she had a special tool to push down her yarn, but we're going to use our fingers. Then you'll head back over. Now take a look here. If I follow the exact same pattern as last time, I will actually pull my thread back through and it won't work. So what I want to do is notice that right here, I've gone under. Now I want to go over on my way back. So I'm going to go skip over that one and do exactly the opposite of last time. You can help lift with your fingers. So now I'm going under here where I went over before. So it's exactly the opposite as I weave. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, and I'm checking again. Is it exactly the opposite of the last time? If it's not, and I pull, it will pull through. Now you notice my needle came off, no problem. Just pull it through, and it looks good. I'm going to not pull tight. So if I pull tight, you'll notice I start to move my warp threads together. I don't want that, so I'm going to keep it flat, push it down with my fingers. Now, if your yarn falls off your needle, like mine did, all you do is put it back, get that short 4-finger tail again, and you might have to wrap it up to get it in, and then continue to weave. So on my next line, I'm looking, and I notice this is over. This time I'm going to go under, and continue along the way. So we're going to stop right there, and I'm going to show you how to then add your next color. So I'm switching to a different loom where I've woven a bit more. When you finish with one color, you're going to know you're done because you'll have about, once again, a 4-finger length tail sticking out the side. That's not enough to weave another row. So I'm going to stop, go back to the yarn cart, and I never want you to select more than one color from the yarn cart at a time. So just choose one color at a time and then go back the next time you need to. So I'm ready with my next yellow here. I've put 4 fingers through. On my short end I have my long tail. I'm going to start on the opposite side from the tail over here, from my last tail. I notice my last yarn went over here, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to go under and continue to weave. That. Check it, pull it through, and once again, how long of a tail am I leaving behind? 4 finger lengths. Push this down. Now I've begun my second color, and I can continue weaving. I notice this one is under here, so I'm going to go over. Do the exact opposite of the line before. And that is how we weave. So when I come back and I look in your folders, what I will expect to see is a completed story planning sheet. Just the top part needs to be completed, not the part at the bottom. And then I need to see you with at least one color woven on your loom. Hopefully you would have had time to start on 2. So you'll have the rest of the period to work. The first thing that the teacher is going to go over again is how to use the yarn cart, and then she'll pass out needles to you depending on how much of your story planning sheet you have done. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.